Julian Hart has everything money can buy, except the courage to love out loud. When his secret relationship goes public in the worst way, he must choose status or soul. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Julian Hart checked his reflection in the elevator mirror and straightened his expensive tie. At 28, he'd finally made it. The tech investment fund he'd started 3 years ago was making serious money, and tonight's party on the rooftop of Miami's most exclusive hotel was proof he belonged in the elite circles of the wealthy and powerful. "Hold the door," a voice called out. Julian pressed the button and Richard Whitmore stepped in. With his perfect tan, designer suit, and family money that went back generations, Richard represented everything Julian had worked so hard to become part of. "Ready for another wild night?" Richard asked, slapping Julian's shoulder. "Blake's got some models coming. Victoria's Secret, I think." Julian nodded with a practiced smile. "Sounds great." The truth was, these parties were starting to feel empty. The same people, the same conversations about stock options and vacation homes, but Julian would never admit that. Not when it had taken years of grinding to escape his poor Chicago neighborhood and be accepted by people like Richard. "By the way," Richard said as they reached the top floor, "Daddy's putting together that investment group for the new tech campus. You in?" Julian's heart raced. This was the opportunity he'd been waiting for. "Absolutely. Count me in." "That's my man," Richard grinned. "Just don't bring any drama to the table. You know how Daddy feels about keeping things uncomplicated." Julian knew exactly what Richard meant. His friend group was almost exclusively white, exclusively rich and exclusively shallow. They dated Instagram models, drove sports cars, and mocked anything outside their bubble of privilege. "Speaking of which," Richard added as they walked toward the noise of the party, "Amber's been asking about you. She's single again." Amber was beautiful, blonde, and came from money. The perfect match, according to Richard and the others. The kind of woman they approved of. "I'll say hello," Julian said, though his heart wasn't in it. The party was in full swing. Champagne flowed freely, music thumped, and beautiful people mingled against the backdrop of Miami's glittering skyline. Julian made his rounds, shaking hands, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, playing the part of the successful investor they expected him to be. 3 hours later, he needed air. He slipped away from a conversation about yacht prices and found a quiet corner of the rooftop. Pulling out his phone, he checked the time, 11:30 p.m. He scrolled to a text message from earlier that day. "Good luck at your fancy party. Remember, you're as good as any of them. Better, actually. Z." Julian smiled at the message from Zarya. He wanted to call her to hear her soft voice, but he knew better than to do it here. Instead, he typed a quick response. "Miss you. Leaving soon. Meet at our spot tomorrow. 10 a.m. Her reply came instantly. "I'll bring coffee and my sketchbook." "Can't wait." Julian tucked his phone away, feeling lighter just from that brief exchange. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. The small beachside cafe was nothing like the glamorous venues Julian frequented with his wealthy friends. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and the constant sound of waves instead of club music. This was Zarya's world, and over the past few months, it had become Julian's escape. She was already there when he arrived, seated at their usual corner table, sketchbook open. Her dark curls framed her face as she concentrated on her drawing, completely lost in her work. She wore a simple yellow sundress that complemented her deep brown skin beautifully. Julian stood watching her for a moment, feeling something he never felt in his other life. Peace. Real, genuine peace. "Are you going to stand there all day?" Zarya asked without looking up, a smile in her voice. "Just enjoying the view," Julian replied, taking the seat across from her. Zarya finally looked up, her warm brown eyes meeting his. "Long night?" "Too long," he admitted. "The usual crowd, the usual talk, the usual lies?" she asked gently. Julian shifted uncomfortably. "I don't lie, Zarya. I just keep certain parts of my life separate." "Separate? Like me?" It wasn't a question. "It's complicated," Julian said, reaching for her hand across the table. "My business associates, they're not the most open-minded people." "You mean they wouldn't approve of you dating a black woman who works at a children's hospital instead of a hedge fund?" Julian winced at her directness. "It's not just that. They're my connections, my network. Everything I've built depends on those relationships." Zarya closed her sketchbook. "We've been seeing each other for 4 months, Julian. You've never once invited me to meet your friends. You've never posted a single picture of us together." "I'm protecting you from them," Julian insisted. "Trust me, You wouldn't like them anyway. Then why do you spend so much time with people you have to protect me from? Zarya challenged. Before Julian could answer, his phone buzzed. Richard's name flashed on the screen. Julian hesitated, then turned the phone face down. See? That's progress, he joked weakly. Zarya didn't smile. Do they even know I exist? Julian looked away. They know I'm seeing someone, but they don't know who, Zarya finished for him. They don't know about this. She gestured between them. I'll tell them when the time is right, Julian promised, knowing it sounded hollow even to his own ears. Zarya studied his face for a long moment. I fell in love with you that day in the thunderstorm, remember? You came rushing into this cafe, soaking wet, looking completely out of place in your fancy suit. Julian smiled at the memory. You offered me your napkin to dry my face. I didn't care about your money or your connections. I just saw a man who needed a napkin, Zarya said softly. I'm starting to wonder if that man still exists. Julian squeezed her hand. He does. With you, I'm the real me. The rest is just business. Love isn't a secret, Julian. Not when it's real. Julian felt a stab of guilt, but pushed it aside. Can we not talk about this today? I missed you. Let's enjoy our morning. Zarya looked like she wanted to say more, but instead nodded. Okay, for now. They spent the next few hours walking along the beach, talking about Zarya's work at the Children's Hospital and her poetry. Julian listened intently as she described the art therapy sessions she led for sick kids, his admiration for her growing with every word. One little boy, Matteo, he was so scared of his treatment, Zarya was saying. So we drew pictures of his fear as a tiny monster that got smaller with each drawing. By the end of the week, he could face his treatments without crying. You're amazing, Julian said sincerely. The work you do, it actually matters. And yours doesn't? Zarya asked. Julian shrugged. I move money around, make rich people richer. It's not exactly changing lives. It could be, Zarya suggested, if you wanted it to. Their conversation was interrupted by Julian's phone ringing again. This time he checked it and frowned. I have to take this, he said apologetically. It's about a deal we're closing Monday. Zarya nodded. Go ahead. Julian stepped away to take the call. When he returned 5 minutes later, his expression had changed. I'm sorry, he said, but I need to go. Emergency meeting about the tech campus project. On Saturday? Zarya questioned. Richard's father is only in town for the weekend, Julian explained. This is the big one, Zarya. The opportunity I've been waiting for. Disappointment flashed across her face, but she nodded. Go. Do what you need to do. Julian kissed her quickly. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Dinner tomorrow night? Your favorite place? Sure, Zarya said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. As Julian hurried away, he didn't notice Zarya watching him go, didn't see the poem she started writing in her sketchbook. Loving a man who hides me from the world is like living in a beautiful prison. The meeting with Richard's father, William Whitmore, took place in a private dining room at an exclusive country club. Julian was the only person of color present, a fact he was painfully aware of, but had learned to ignore. Julian, my boy, William boomed. Richard tells me you've got the Midas touch with these tech startups. I've had some success, sir, Julian replied modestly. William nodded approvingly. We need fresh blood in this venture. Someone who understands these new technologies better than us old-timers. For the next 2 hours, they discussed the tech campus project. With each minute, Julian grew more excited. This wasn't just any investment opportunity. This was his chance to be a founding partner in what could become Miami's version of Silicon Valley. One last thing, William said as the meeting wound down. The announcement gala is next month. Black tie, press, the works. Bring a suitable date, of course. These things matter for the image. Julian felt a familiar twist in his stomach. Of course. Good man, William said, slapping him on the back. I've seen photos of that blonde you've been dating. Very photogenic. Julian froze. Sir? Richard mentioned you've been seeing someone. Instagram model or something. Perfect for the cameras. Richard jumped in smoothly. That's what I assumed, Dad. Julian's been pretty private about his personal life lately. William laughed. Well, whoever she is, make sure she looks good in the society pages. We're selling an image here, not just a business. Julian forced a smile and nodded, hating himself a little more with each passing second. Later, as they left the club, Richard pulled Julian aside. What's going on with you? You've been distant lately, missing half our parties. Just busy with work, Julian lied. Richard studied him. You know, there are rumors you've been slumming it on the other side of town. Please tell me you're not having some kind of crisis of conscience. What are you talking about? Julian asked, his heart racing. Blake saw you at some dive cafe near the public beach last week. Said you were with some girl. Not your usual type. Julian felt cold fear grip him. Just a business meeting, potential investor. Richard looked skeptical but nodded. Good, because you're finally where you belong, man. Don't mess it up now. As Richard walked away, Julian realized he was trapped between two worlds and the walls were closing in. Sunday evening, Julian picked Zarya up for dinner. She lived in a modest apartment near the hospital, filled with books, plants, and her artwork. It was more of a home than Julian's sleek, expensive condo would ever be. You look beautiful, Julian said sincerely when she opened the door. She wore a simple blue dress that hugged her curves, her hair loose around her shoulders. Thank you, she said, grabbing a small purse. Ready? The restaurant was a tiny Italian place they had discovered together, family-owned and far from the trendy spots Julian's friends frequented. The owner, Maria, greeted them like family. My favorite couple, she exclaimed. Your usual table is ready. Over pasta and wine, Julian told Zarya about the tech campus project, careful to leave out the parts about suitable dates and image concerns. That's wonderful, Zarya said genuinely. It sounds like everything you've worked for. It is, Julian agreed. But enough about me. How was your weekend? Zarya brightened. Actually, I have news too. Remember those anonymous poems I've been posting online? A publisher reached out. They want to talk about a collection. Zarya, that's amazing. Julian reached across the table to squeeze her hand. I'm so proud of you. There's more, she continued, excitement in her eyes. They're hosting a reading next Saturday. They want me to be the featured poet. Julian's smile faltered slightly. Next Saturday? Yes, it's at that new bookstore downtown, Zarya said. I'd love for you to be there. It would mean everything to have you supporting me. Julian's mind raced. Next Saturday was Blake's yacht party, an annual event that everyone in his circle attended. Missing it would raise questions he wasn't prepared to answer. Of course I'll be there, he heard himself say. Zarya's face lit up. Really? You mean it? Absolutely, Julian promised, pushing aside his concerns. I wouldn't miss it for anything. They finished dinner and walked along the waterfront, hand in hand. For a few hours, Julian forgot about his double life and just enjoyed being with the woman he loved. Later, as they stood outside Zarya's apartment, she looked up at him with those honest eyes that saw right through him. I love you, Julian, she said simply. I love you too, he replied, and in that moment nothing else mattered. But as he drove home alone to his empty luxury condo, reality crashed back. His phone was filled with messages from Richard about the yacht party, reminders about meetings with William's team, and an invitation to a photo shoot for a business magazine featuring Miami's most eligible bachelors. Julian sat in his parked car, phone in hand, feeling torn between two worlds. The one he'd fought so hard to be part of, and the one where he felt truly alive. Something had to give. He just didn't know what. The week passed in a blur of meetings and preparations for both the tech campus project and Zarya's poetry reading. Julian was stretched thin, constantly checking his phone, making excuses, and trying to keep his two worlds from colliding. Friday night, the night before both the yacht party and Zarya's reading, Richard insisted on a guys' night at their favorite lounge. Julian couldn't find a way to refuse without raising suspicions. The lounge was exclusive, with a strict door policy that Julian knew was often used to keep out people who didn't fit the right image. He'd once been one of those people, waiting outside while rich kids walked right in. Now he was a VIP, and the irony wasn't lost on him. To the future tech kings of Miami, Blake toasted, raising his glass of expensive scotch. And to Julian, finally joining the big leagues, Richard added. William's impressed, man. You're in. Julian should have felt elated. This was what he'd worked for. Instead, he felt hollow. What's with the face? Blake asked. You look like someone died. Just tired, Julian replied. Big week. Well, wake up, Richard laughed. The real party's tomorrow. Annual yacht tradition. About that, Julian started hesitantly. I might be a little late. The table went quiet. Late? Richard repeated. To the biggest social event of the season? Why? Julian's mind raced for an excuse. Just a quick business meeting I couldn't reschedule. Blake snorted. On a Saturday with who? A potential investor, Julian lied. More important than connecting with William's partners, Richard pressed. They're all going to be there, expecting to meet you. Julian felt trapped. I'll be there. Just might not make the beginning. This wouldn't have anything to do with your mystery woman, would it? Blake asked slyly. Julian's head snapped up. What? Come on, man. Blake laughed. We know you've been seeing someone. The question is, why all the secrecy unless—" His voice trailed off suggestively. "Unless what?" Julian asked, his throat tight. Blake shrugged. "Unless she's not exactly our kind of people." The table went quiet again, tension thick in the air. "Let me guess," Blake continued, alcohol making him bold. "Another Instagram blonde? Better not pull a Kanye on us, bro." The table erupted in laughter. Julian felt sick to his stomach, but he forced a laugh, hating himself with every second. Unknown to Julian at a nearby table, someone was recording the conversation for a social media post about Miami's elite nightlife. The camera caught everything, including Julian's laugh at Blake's racist joke. By morning, the clip would be circulating online, tagged with the lounge's location and the names of the up-and-coming Miami entrepreneurs featured in it. And Zarya, who followed local business news for her brother's sake, would see it all. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear in Miami. Julian woke with a pounding headache and the fuzzy memory of last night's conversation at the lounge. He checked his phone, 3 missed calls from Richard, probably about the yacht party, and a good morning text from Zarya. "Can't wait to share my poetry with you tonight. It means everything that you'll be there." Julian's stomach twisted with guilt. He had promised to be at her reading, but Richard's warning about missing the yacht party echoed in his mind. The tech campus deal depended on making the right impression with William and his partners. "Looking forward to it," Julian texted back, still unsure how he would manage to be in 2 places at once. He dragged himself out of bed and made coffee, scrolling through his social media while he waited for the caffeine to kick in. A notification caught his eye. He'd been tagged in a post by Miami Nightlife, a popular account that featured the city's club scene. Julian tapped on it, then froze. The video showed last night at the lounge, clearly recorded from a nearby table. There he was with Richard, Blake, and the others. The audio was crystal clear. "Let me guess, another Instagram blonde? Better not pull a Kanye on us, bro." And there was Julian, laughing along with the rest. "Oh, no," Julian whispered, his coffee forgotten. "No, no, no." He immediately tried to call Zarya but got no answer. He sent a text. "Hey, can we talk? Need to explain something." Minutes ticked by with no response. Julian showered and dressed quickly, deciding to go straight to her apartment. He needed to explain before she jumped to conclusions. But as he reached for his car keys, his phone rang. It was William Whitmore. "Julian, my boy." William's voice boomed through the speaker. "Just confirming you'll be at the yacht by noon. The investors from Silicon Valley are eager to meet you." Julian closed his eyes, torn between his personal life and professional opportunity. "Yes, sir. I'll be there." "Excellent. And bring that lovely date we discussed. Perfect time to introduce her to everyone." Julian's mouth went dry. "Actually, sir, No excuses, son. Image is everything in this business. See you at noon sharp." The line went dead before Julian could respond. He stood in his entryway, keys in hand, paralyzed by indecision. Finally, he made his choice. He would go to Zarya's apartment now, explain everything, and then head to the yacht party. He'd leave early and still make it to her reading by 7 p.m. It could work. It had to work. Zarya sat cross-legged on her small balcony, a notebook open on her lap. But she wasn't writing. Instead, she stared at her phone, the video playing for the 5th time. Each replay hurt more than the last. Julian's laugh cut the deepest, not because he was laughing at a racist joke, though that was painful enough, but because in that laugh she heard the truth. She was his secret, his shame. Her phone buzzed with another text from Julian. She ignored it just as she had ignored his calls. What was there to say? The video spoke for itself. A knock at her door startled her. She knew who it was before she even looked through the peephole. Julian stood there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, worry etched on his face. Against her better judgment, Zarya opened the door. "Thank God," Julian breathed. "You're not answering your phone." "I saw the video," Zarya said flatly. Julian winced. "I can explain." "Can you?" Zarya stepped back, allowing him to enter. "Explain why you laughed when your friend made that racist joke? Explain why, after 4 months, I'm still your dirty little secret." "It's not like that," Julian insisted, following her into the apartment. "I didn't want to laugh, I was caught off guard." "You were being yourself," Zarya corrected him. "The real Julian, the one who exists when I'm not around." Julian ran a hand through his hair. "No, the real me is who I am with you, those guys, that world, it's just business." "Business," Zarya repeated, her voice hollow. "Is that what you call it when you laugh at jokes about black women? When you hide me away like something shameful?" "I'm not ashamed of you," Julian said, reaching for her hands. Zarya stepped back, avoiding his touch. Then why haven't you introduced me to a single one of your friends? Why do we only go to places where no one knows you? Why isn't there a single photo of us together on your social media? Julian had no good answer. It's complicated, he said lamely. No, it's actually very simple, Zarya replied, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. You're a coward, Julian. The word hit him like a physical blow. That's not fair. Isn't it? Zarya challenged. You worked so hard to be accepted by these people that you've become just like them. Shallow, image-obsessed, caring more about appearances than what's real. Julian shook his head. This deal I'm working on, it could change everything. Once it's done, I'll have the freedom to... To what? Zarya interrupted. To finally acknowledge me, to stop hiding me. There will always be another deal, Julian. Another reason to keep me in the shadows. She turned away from him, arms wrapped around herself. I deserve better than to be someone's secret. Julian's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He ignored it, but Zarya noticed. Go ahead, she said bitterly. Answer it. I'm sure it's important business. Julian reluctantly checked his phone. A text from Richard. Where are you? Everyone's boarding the yacht. William's asking. Julian looked up to see Zarya watching him, a sad smile on her face. Let me guess. Your other life is calling. Zarya, please, Julian begged. Just give me a chance to make this right. How? She asked. What are you willing to change? Julian's phone buzzed again. Richard was calling now. I have to go to this yacht party, Julian admitted. It's crucial for the tech campus deal, but I promise I'll leave early and be at your reading by 7. We can talk more then. Zarya laughed, but there was no humor in it. You still don't get it, do you? You're standing in my apartment supposedly trying to save our relationship, and you're still choosing them over me. It's not a choice, Julian insisted. It's just a few hours. This deal... Stop, Zarya held up her hand. Just stop. Go to your party, Julian. Go be with the people who matter to you. You matter to me, Julian said desperately. Zarya shook her head. Not enough. Not when it counts. Julian's phone rang again. Zarya walked to her door and opened it. You should go. You're going to be late. Zarya, please. Julian tried one more time. I love you. Love isn't a secret, she said quietly, echoing her words from their cafe conversation. Not when it's real. Julian stood frozen, torn between the door and the woman he loved. His phone continued to ring. Finally, he stepped toward the door. I'll be at your reading, he promised. We'll fix this. Zarya said nothing as he walked past her. Once he was in the hallway, she closed the door softly behind him. Only then did she let the tears fall. The yacht party was everything Julian had once dreamed of, the pinnacle of success and acceptance. Beautiful people in expensive clothes mingled on the deck of Blake's father's 120-foot yacht as it cruised along Miami's coastline. Champagne flowed freely, business cards were exchanged, and deals were made with handshakes over panoramic ocean views. Julian should have been elated. William Whitmore had introduced him to the Silicon Valley investors as the future of Miami tech, and they seemed genuinely interested in his ideas. This was his moment, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. Instead, he felt hollow, going through the motions with a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. His thoughts kept drifting to Zarya and the hurt in her eyes when he'd left her apartment. There he is! Richard appeared at Julian's side, slinging an arm around his shoulders. The man of the hour, where's your date? Don't tell me you came alone. Julian shrugged off Richard's arm. Wasn't feeling well, he lied. Richard studied him through narrowed eyes. What's going on with you lately? You're acting strange. Nothing, Julian insisted. Just focused on the deal. We'll focus on having some fun for a change, Richard said, pressing a fresh glass of champagne into Julian's hand. We're celebrating. For the next few hours, Julian played his part, laughing at the right moments, discussing investment strategies, accepting congratulations. But his eyes kept drifting to his watch. It was already 5:30 p.m., and the yacht wouldn't dock until 6. Zarya's reading started at 7, clear across town. Julian, come meet Sophia, William called, gesturing him over to where he stood with a stunning blonde woman. She's just moved to Miami from New York, works in fashion PR. Julian obediently joined them, shaking the woman's perfectly manicured hand. William tells me you're the rising star of the tech scene, Sophia said with practiced charm. I'm always interested in rising things. Under normal circumstances, Julian would have been flattered by her obvious interest. Now he just felt tired. Nice to meet you, he said politely. If you'll excuse me, I need to make a call. Julian moved to a quieter corner of the deck and checked his phone. No messages from Zarya. He typed out a text. On my way soon. Can't wait to hear your poetry. I'm so sorry about earlier. He watched the message send, then disappear into the dreaded delivered status without being read. Julian looked at his watch again. 5:45 p.m. Even if the yacht docked on time, even if he left immediately, he'd be cutting it close to make Zarya's reading by 7. He needed to leave now. He found William deep in conversation with the investors. "Excuse me, sir," Julian interrupted. "I'm afraid I have an emergency I need to handle. Family matter." William's smile faltered slightly. "Can't it wait, son? We're just getting to the good part." "I'm sorry. It can't," Julian said firmly. "I'll call you first thing tomorrow to follow up." William looked displeased but nodded. "Family first, I suppose. We'll continue this discussion Monday." Julian made his way to Richard next. "I need to get off the yacht." Richard blinked in surprise. "What? We're in the middle of the ocean." "There must be a way," Julian insisted. "A tender boat, something." "What's so urgent?" Julian took a deep breath. "Someone I care about is counting on me to be somewhere at 7, and I can't let her down." Richard's eyes widened. "Her? Is this about that mystery woman?" "Her name is Zarya," Julian said the first time he'd ever spoken her name to any of his wealthy friends. "And yes, this is about her." A slow smile spread across Richard's face, but it wasn't kind. "So it's true. You are slumming it." Julian felt a flash of anger. "Don't talk about her like that." "Oh, come on," Richard laughed. "We all have our little adventures. But you can't seriously be bailing on the most important networking event of the year for some—" "Finish that sentence," Julian warned, "and our friendship is over." Richard held up his hands in mock surrender. "Easy, Tiger. I'm just saying, there's a time and place. And right now you're making a mistake that could cost you everything you've worked for." Julian looked around at the yacht, at the beautiful people with their shallow conversations and expensive drinks. For the first time he saw it clearly. This wasn't success, it was a gilded cage. "Maybe I've been making the mistake all along," Julian said quietly. Richard shook his head. "There's no tender boat. You're stuck here until we dock at 6. But seriously, Julian, think about what you're doing. William is already questioning your commitment." Julian checked his watch again. 5:55 p.m. "When exactly do we dock?" 6:15 probably, Richard said with a shrug. "Traffic was heavy leaving the marina, so we're running behind." Julian's heart sank. Even if he left the second they docked, he'd never make it across town by 7. He was going to break his promise to Zarya. Again. The bookstore was packed for the poetry reading. Every seat was filled with people standing along the walls and sitting cross-legged on the floor. Zarya stood backstage, peeking through the curtain at the growing crowd. "Quite a turnout," the bookstore owner said proudly. "Your online following really showed up." Zarya smiled nervously. "Thank you for this opportunity." "Are you kidding? Your work is exactly what we want to feature. Authentic, emotional, raw." Zarya nodded absently, her eyes scanning the crowd for Julian. It was 6:55 p.m. and there was still no sign of him. No text, no call. She knew in her heart he wasn't coming, but some stubborn part of her refused to believe it. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Finally, a message from Julian. "Yacht running late, traffic terrible. Will be there as soon as I can. Start without me, I'm so sorry." Zarya turned off her phone without replying and slipped it back into her pocket. She'd heard enough excuses. At exactly 7 p.m., the bookstore owner stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our featured poet series. Tonight we have a very special talent, someone whose words have touched thousands online with their honesty and emotional depth. Please welcome Zarya Bennett." The crowd applauded enthusiastically as Zarya took the stage. She adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces, none of them Julian's. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice soft but steady. "Poetry has always been my way of making sense of the world, of processing joy and pain alike. Tonight I'd like to share some pieces from my upcoming collection, Loving in the Light." For the next hour, Zarya read her poetry, each piece more personal than the last. The audience hung on every word, laughing, sighing, and even crying as she shared her truth. When she reached the final poem of the night, she paused. "This last one is new," she explained. "I wrote it just today. It's called Secret Love." She took a deep breath and began. "I was a secret dressed in gold, a melody sung behind closed doors. He loved me in the silence, but feared me in the light. My heart, an offering he kept hidden. My love, a treasure he buried deep. I became a whisper on his lips, when I deserved to be a shout. You cannot grow in shadows, love withers without sun. I am not meant for darkness. I was born to shine. The audience erupted in applause, many rising to their feet. Zarya bowed, tears glistening in her eyes, overwhelmed by the response. As she looked up, her gaze caught on the bookstore's entrance. Julian stood there, still in his yacht party clothes, hair wind-blown from his frantic rush across town. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Too little, too late. Zarya turned away, accepting a bouquet of flowers from the bookstore owner and smiling for photos with fans who lined up to meet her. She did not look at the door again. Julian watched from the back, pride and regret warring in his chest. She was magnificent, talented, poised, radiant, and he had treated her like a secret, something to be ashamed of. He waited until the crowd around her thinned, then approached cautiously. "You were amazing," he said softly. Zarya looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You missed it." "I caught the end," Julian said. "That last poem was about you," Zarya finished for him. "About us." "I tried to get here," Julian explained. "The yacht docked late and then traffic—" "It doesn't matter," Zarya interrupted. "You made your choice long before tonight, Julian. You chose your image, your wealthy friends, your business deals over me, over us." "That's not true," Julian protested. "I love you." "Maybe you do," Zarya said sadly, "but not enough to be proud of me, not enough to stand up to your friends, not enough to choose what's real over what looks good." Julian reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "I can change," he promised. "Give me another chance." Zarya shook her head. "I'm done being your secret, Julian. I deserve to be loved in the light." She gathered her things and walked past him toward the door where her friend Maya waited. Julian followed her outside. "Zarya, please," he called after her. "What can I do to fix this?" She turned to face him one last time. "Nothing. There's nothing to fix, Julian. It's over." With that, she got into Maya's waiting car and drove away, leaving Julian standing alone on the sidewalk, watching the taillights disappear into the Miami night. Julian's world collapsed in the weeks that followed. He went through the motions at work, showed up at the required social events, and even signed the preliminary paperwork for the tech campus deal, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. He tried repeatedly to contact Zarya, calls, texts, even stopping by the children's hospital where she worked. Each attempt was met with silence. Her social media went private, her poetry account inactive. It was as if she had erased him from her life completely. "You need to snap out of it," Richard told him over drinks one evening. "Whatever this funk is, it's affecting business. William's starting to question your commitment again." Julian stared into his untouched scotch. "Do you ever think about who we are, Richard? What we stand for?" Richard rolled his eyes. "Here we go, the existential crisis I've been waiting for." "I'm serious," Julian insisted. "We move money around. We go to parties. We date beautiful women who care more about our bank accounts than who we are as people. What's the point?" "The point," Richard said slowly, as if explaining to a child, "is success, power, having what other people want. Isn't that why you clawed your way up from nothing? To be one of us?" Julian considered the question. Once the answer would have been an unequivocal yes. Now he wasn't so sure. "Maybe I was chasing the wrong dream," Julian said quietly. Richard snorted. "This is about that girl, isn't it? What's her name? Zarya." He pronounced her name with barely disguised contempt. Julian felt a flare of anger. "Don't talk about her like that." "Like what?" "I'm just saying her name," Richard said defensively. "Look, whatever she was to you, she's gone now. Move on. Sophia's been asking about you, by the way." Julian stood up abruptly. "I have to go." "Where?" "Another pity party for one?" Richard called after him. Julian didn't answer. He walked out of the bar and into the warm Miami night, no destination in mind. His feet carried him to the beach, to the spot where he and Zarya had often walked hand in hand. He sat on the sand, watching the waves crash against the shore. For the first time since Zarya left, Julian allowed himself to really feel the loss, not just of her, but of the man he was when he was with her, honest, vulnerable, real. His phone buzzed with a text from William. "Need your final commitment on the tech campus by Monday. Big announcement planned." Julian stared at the message for a long time. This was everything he'd worked for, the culmination of his ambition and sacrifice. But at what cost? He thought about Zarya's poem. "I was a secret dressed in gold, a melody sung behind closed doors. He loved me in the silence, but feared me in the light." She was right. He had been a coward, afraid to stand up to his shallow friends, afraid to be true to himself and the woman he loved, afraid to live in the light. As Julian sat on the beach, the moonlight reflecting off the water, he made a decision. It was time to stop hiding, from his friends, from the world, and most importantly, from himself. He pulled out his phone and began to type. Not a text to William or Richard, but a blog post, a public confession of his cowardice and what true value looked like in relationships. He didn't name Zarya, respecting her privacy even now, but he laid bare his own failings and the toxic culture he had embraced. "I spent years trying to belong with people I didn't even respect," he wrote. "I let their approval matter more than my own integrity. Worst of all, I hid away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was afraid of what others might think. I'm done living in the shadows. It's time to step into the light." Julian hit publish without hesitation. Within hours, the post began to circulate among Miami's tech and business circles. By morning, it had gone viral, shared thousands of times across multiple platforms. The reactions were swift and varied. Richard and the others from his circle sent angry texts, calling him a traitor and worse. William Whitmore left a terse voicemail withdrawing the tech campus offer. Julian had burned his bridges, and he knew it. But there were other responses too, messages from people he'd never met who thanked him for his honesty, who shared similar stories of sacrificing authenticity for acceptance. Several investors reached out, impressed by his integrity, offering to back his future ventures on his terms. Julian read every message, but there was only one person he wanted to hear from. Zarya remained silent, the one voice he longed for lost in the noise. As the dust settled, Julian faced a choice: rebuild his life on his own terms, or try to salvage what remained of his old world. The decision wasn't hard. He withdrew from the toxic social circle, declined invitations to exclusive events, and started focusing on investments that aligned with his true values, companies with diverse leadership, ethical practices, and positive social impact. A month after his public confession, Julian received an invitation to speak at a conference for young entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. The theme was Authentic Leadership in a Superficial World. Julian accepted immediately. The day of the conference arrived, and Julian stood backstage nervously reviewing his notes. He had spoken at dozens of business events before, but this felt different, more honest, more important. As he waited for his introduction, Julian glanced out at the audience filling the auditorium. His heart stopped. There, in the third row, sat Zarya. Julian's heart pounded as he stared at Zarya sitting in the third row. She looked different somehow, more confident, her natural curls styled in a way that framed her face beautifully. She wore a simple yellow dress that reminded him of the first day they'd met at the cafe. The conference moderator's voice jolted him back to reality. "And now please welcome our next speaker, Julian Hart, who will be discussing authentic leadership in today's business world." The audience applauded as Julian walked onto the stage. His carefully prepared speech suddenly felt inadequate. With Zarya's eyes on him, only the complete truth would do. "Thank you," Julian began, setting aside his notes. "I had a whole speech prepared about leadership and authenticity, but seeing someone in the audience reminds me that rehearsed words aren't what brought me here today." He took a deep breath and continued. 2 months ago, I was living what many would consider a dream life. Successful tech investor, luxury condo, exclusive social circle. I had everything I thought I wanted." Julian paused, finding Zarya's eyes in the crowd. "And I was miserable." The audience grew quiet, leaning forward in their seats. "I grew up poor in Chicago," Julian continued. "I fought my way into elite circles by becoming what I thought they wanted, someone who valued image over substance, who measured success by the price tag of my watch or the exclusivity of the clubs I could get into." Julian moved from behind the podium, speaking directly to the audience. "Along the way, I met someone extraordinary, someone real, someone who valued what was in my heart, not what was in my bank account, and I blew it. I kept her a secret because I was afraid my wealthy, mostly white friends wouldn't accept her. I chose their approval over her love." He could see Zarya shift in her seat, but her expression remained unreadable. "I'm not here to talk about leadership strategies or networking tips," Julian said. "I'm here to tell you that success means nothing if you lose yourself in the process, if you become someone you don't recognize, if you hide the best parts of your life to please people who don't even care about you." Julian spoke for another 20 minutes, sharing his journey from ambition to emptiness to awakening. He talked about the toxic culture of exclusivity in business, about how true diversity wasn't just a talking point, but a source of strength and innovation. He shared how his new investment fund specifically sought out founders from underrepresented backgrounds, not as charity but because their perspectives were valuable and overlooked. Throughout his speech, Julian's eyes kept finding Zarya in the crowd, At times he felt like he was speaking only to her. "So that's my advice," Julian concluded. "Don't be like I was. Don't hide your light to make others comfortable with their darkness. Build your success on truth, not image. It's a harder path, but it's the only one worth walking." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Julian nodded his thanks, his eyes still on Zarya. She stood with the others, applauding, but her face remained neutral. After the speech, Julian was surrounded by attendees asking questions and sharing their own stories. He answered politely, but kept scanning the crowd for Zarya. Had she left? Would she give him a chance to speak with her? Finally, as the crowd thinned, he spotted her near the exit, speaking with a young woman who appeared to be asking about her work. Julian waited patiently until their conversation ended, then approached cautiously. "Zarya," he said simply. She turned to face him, her expression guarded. "That was quite a speech." "I meant every word," Julian replied, "especially the parts about you." "You didn't mention me by name," Zarya pointed out. "I wanted to respect your privacy," Julian explained, "but everyone who knows me understands who I was talking about." Zarya studied him for a moment. "Why are you here, Julian?" "I was invited to speak," he said, then shook his head. "No, that's not what you're asking. I'm here because I needed to say those things, because I'm trying to become the man I should have been all along." "And who is that?" Zarya asked. "Someone worthy of you," Julian said quietly. Zarya's expression softened slightly. "That's not for you to decide." "I know," Julian acknowledged. I miss you, Zarya. Every day." For a moment they stood in silence, the noise of the conference fading around them. Finally Zarya spoke. "I have to go. I'm meeting my editor for lunch." Julian tried to hide his disappointment. "Editor?" A small smile touched Zarya's lips. "The poetry collection is happening. It's being published next month." "That's wonderful," Julian said sincerely. "Congratulations." "Thank you," Zarya replied. She hesitated, then added, "There's a book launch event at Rivera Books on the 15th. 7 o'clock. Julian's heart leaped. Was this an invitation? "I'll be there," he promised. Zarya nodded, neither confirming nor rejecting his attendance. "Goodbye, Julian." "Goodbye, Zarya," he replied, watching as she walked away, head held high. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A door left slightly ajar rather than firmly closed. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind for Julian. His speech at the conference had generated significant interest in his new investment fund. Several major publications requested interviews about his public stance against toxic business culture. Former associates alternately reached out to mend fences or burn bridges completely. Richard called just once. "You've lost your mind," he said without preamble. "William's blacklisting you. You're done in this town." "I don't think so," Julian replied calmly. "Turns out there are plenty of investors who care more about returns than country club memberships." "You threw away everything for what? Some girl? A moment of social justice glory?" Julian sighed. "You still don't get it, Richard. I didn't throw anything away. I finally started building something real." Richard scoffed. "How you're going to regret this?" "The only thing I regret," Julian said, "is how long it took me to see the truth." After hanging up, Julian turned his attention to his new venture. He hired a diverse team, rented modest but comfortable office space, and began reviewing investment opportunities with fresh eyes. For the first time in his career, Julian felt like his work had purpose beyond personal gain. But despite his professional progress, Julian's personal life remained in limbo. He hadn't contacted Zarya since the conference, respecting her space and waiting for her book launch. He'd marked the date, July 15th, on his calendar and was counting down the days. The night before the launch, Julian couldn't sleep. He paced his condo, rehearsing what he might say to Zarya if given the chance. Nothing seemed adequate. How could words make up for his failure? Actions were what mattered now. Julian had already taken steps to change his life. But was it enough? Would Zarya see the difference? Would she care? Morning came with no answers, just the nervous energy of anticipation. Julian threw himself into work, reviewing pitches from startup founders until it was time to prepare for the book launch. He dressed carefully, not in the expensive designer suits he'd once favored, but in simple, well-made clothes that felt more authentic. He debated bringing flowers, but decided against it. This wasn't a date. It was Zarya's professional triumph, and he wanted the focus to remain on her accomplishment. Julian arrived at Rivera Books 30 minutes early, parking his car several blocks away and walking to clear his head. The bookstore was already filling with people when he arrived, young writers, artists, and poetry lovers, drawn by Zarya's online following. He chose a seat in the back row, not wanting to distract from Zarya's moment. The small stage was set with a podium and a table displaying copies of her book, titled Melodies in the Light. The cover featured a simple but striking image of the sun's rays breaking through clouds, illuminating a woman's silhouette. At exactly 7 p.m., the bookstore owner welcomed everyone and introduced Zarya. The crowd erupted in enthusiastic applause as she took the stage, radiant in a flowing dress the color of sunset. Her natural hair was styled in an elaborate updo adorned with small white flowers. She looked confident, beautiful, and completely in her element. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Zarya began, her voice soft but clear. "This collection represents a journey, from silence to voice, from shadows to light. Many of these poems were written during a time of personal struggle, when I was learning what I deserve and what I will no longer accept." Her eyes scanned the audience as she spoke, eventually finding Julian in the back row. She held his gaze for a moment before continuing. "But this book isn't just about pain or loss. It's about rediscovery, about standing in your truth, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult." For the next hour, Zarya read selected poems from her collection, each one more powerful than the last. The audience hung on every word, responding with snaps, applause, and occasional murmurs of agreement. Julian sat motionless, absorbing each line, recognizing their relationship in some poems, seeing Zarya's independent journey in others. When the reading concluded, people lined up to have their books signed. Julian waited patiently at the end of the line, a copy of Melodies in the Light in his hands. He'd purchased it immediately upon arrival, wanting to support Zarya's work. Finally, it was his turn. Julian approached the table where Zarya sat, surrounded by stacks of her books and well-wishers. "Congratulations," he said sincerely. "Your work is beautiful." Zarya looked up, a small smile playing at her lips. "Thank you for coming. I wouldn't have missed it," Julian replied. He handed her his copy of the book. "Would you sign it for me?" Zarya nodded, opening to the title page. She hesitated, pen poised above the paper, then wrote something and closed the book before returning it to him. "There's a small reception at the cafe next door," she said, "for friends and family." Julian wasn't sure if this was an invitation or simply information. "That's nice," he said carefully. Zarya seemed to read his uncertainty. "Will you come? There's something I want to talk to you about." Hope bloomed in Julian's chest. "Of course." Zarya nodded, then turned to greet the bookstore owner who had approached with a question. Julian stepped aside, clutching the signed book to his chest. Later, in the quiet corner of the cafe, Julian finally opened the book to read what Zarya had written. "To Julian, who is learning to live in the light, thank you for your honesty. Zarya." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it wasn't rejection either. It was acknowledgement of his growth, and perhaps, just perhaps, an opening. The reception was intimate. About 20 people gathered to celebrate Zarya's achievement. Julian recognized a few faces from the children's hospital where Zarya worked, including her best friend Maya, who gave him a cool but not hostile nod. Julian kept to himself, not wanting to intrude on Zarya's moment. He found a quiet corner and waited, watching as she moved through the room, accepting congratulations and hugging friends. She was in her element here, surrounded by people who appreciated her talent and supported her journey. Eventually, as the crowd thinned, Zarya made her way to Julian's corner. She held 2 cups of tea, offering one to him. "Thank you," he said, taking the cup. "Everything tonight was amazing. You were amazing." Zarya smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given him since their breakup. It felt good, scary, but good. "Your work deserves to be celebrated," Julian said. "I always knew you were talented, but hearing those poems tonight, they're powerful, Zarya. Writing them helped me heal," she admitted, "after everything." Julian nodded, understanding the unspoken reference to their breakup. "I'm sorry I hurt you," he said quietly. "I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm truly sorry." "I believe you," Zarya replied. "I've been following what you've been doing, the new investment fund, the mentorship program for young entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. It's impressive. It's what I should have been doing all along," Julian said, "using my success to create opportunities, not just wealth." They fell into a comfortable silence, sipping their tea. Finally, Zarya spoke. "I want to show you something." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, scrolling through it before handing it to Julian. "This was sent to me last week." Julian looked at the screen. It was an email from a young black woman named Tasha, a college student studying business. She wrote about seeing Julian's conference speech online and how it had inspired her to pursue her startup idea despite discouragement from professors and peers. "She's one of dozens who have reached out," Zarya explained. "Your speech went viral in certain circles. People are listening, Julian." Julian handed the phone back, deeply moved. "I was just speaking my truth. That's exactly why it matters," Zarya said. "Authenticity always does." Another silence fell between them, heavier this time with unspoken questions. "Zarya," Julian began hesitantly, "I know I have no right to ask, but is there any chance for us? I still love you. I never stopped." Zarya looked down at her tea, then back up at Julian, her eyes searching his face. "I still have feelings for you, Julian, but I can't go back to what we were." "I don't want to go back," Julian assured her. "I want something new, something better, something real in the light." Zarya smiled sadly. "Words are easy. Then let me show you," Julian said earnestly. "Not tonight, not tomorrow, but over time. Let me prove that I've changed, that I understand what matters now." Zarya considered his words. "What exactly are you asking for?" "A second chance," Julian said simply. "Not to pick up where we left off, but to start again, slowly, on your terms." Zarya was quiet for a long moment, weighing his request. Finally she spoke. "I have a poetry reading at the Children's Hospital next week, Tuesday at noon. The kids in the oncology ward have been asking about my book." Julian's heart lifted. "I'd love to be there." "It's not a date," Zarya clarified. "It's just a beginning, a chance to see if there's still something worth building." "That's all I'm asking for," Julian assured her. As the reception wound down, Julian helped clean up, stacking empty plates and gathering used napkins. Zarya's friends watched him curiously, clearly wondering about his role in her life. Maya pulled Zarya aside at one point, their whispered conversation accompanied by glances in Julian's direction. When it was time to leave, Julian walked Zarya to her car. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said. "It meant a lot." "Thank you for inviting me," Julian replied, "and for giving me a chance to see you again." Zarya nodded, unlocking her car door. "Tuesday at noon. Don't be late." Julian smiled. "I wouldn't dream of it." He watched her drive away, hope replacing the emptiness that had been his constant companion since their breakup. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. The children's hospital was bright and colorful, walls adorned with murals and artwork created by young patients. Julian arrived 30 minutes early, a bundle of nerves and anticipation. He checked in at the front desk, explaining he was there for Zarya Bennett's poetry reading. "Oh, you must be Julian," the receptionist said with a knowing smile. "Zarya mentioned you'd be coming. Take the elevator to the 3rd floor, then follow the signs to the Rainbow Room." Julian thanked her and made his way up, wondering what exactly Zarya had said about him. The 3rd floor was the oncology ward, where children battled the most serious illnesses. Despite the gravity of their conditions, the atmosphere was surprisingly upbeat. Music played softly from speakers, volunteers pushed art carts from room to room, and staff greeted each child by name with genuine warmth. The Rainbow Room turned out to be a large multi-purpose space, with comfortable seating arranged in a semicircle. Several children were already there, some in wheelchairs, others trailing IV poles, all chatting excitedly. Parents and hospital staff stood around the edges of the room, smiling at the children's enthusiasm. Julian found an unobtrusive spot near the back and waited. At exactly noon, Zarya entered, carrying her book and a colorful bag. The children cheered, clearly familiar with her. "Miss Zarya," called a small girl with a colorful scarf wrapped around her head. "You came." "Of course I did, Lily," Zarya replied warmly. "I promised, didn't I? And look what I brought." She held up her book, then reached into the bag and pulled out smaller versions. "A copy for each of you." The children's excitement grew as Zarya handed out the books. Julian watched in amazement as she interacted with each child, remembering their names, asking specific questions about their treatments or families. This was Zarya in her element, compassionate, present, making a real difference in these children's lives. "Okay, everyone settled?" Zarya asked, taking a seat at the front of the semicircle. "Today I thought I'd read some of my new poems, and then maybe you could share some of yours. I know many of you have been writing your own poetry." The children nodded eagerly. Zarya opened her book and began to read, choosing lighter, more hopeful pieces than she had at the bookstore launch. The children listened attentively, occasionally asking questions or commenting on lines that resonated with them. Julian was captivated, not just by Zarya's poetry but by the connection she had with these children, She spoke to them honestly but gently, never talking down to them despite their young ages. She created a space where they could express their fears and hopes through art, even in the midst of their difficult treatments. After reading several poems, Zarya invited the children to share their own work. One by one, they read poems about hospital food, missing home, brave cells fighting cancer, and dreams of future adventures. Each piece, no matter how simple, was met with encouraging words from Zarya and applause from the group. A small boy with no hair and large glasses raised his hand tentatively. "Miss Zarya, I wrote something, but it's kind of sad. Is that okay?" "Of course, Miguel," Zarya assured him. "Poetry is for all our feelings, not just the happy ones." Miguel nodded seriously and read a poem about the night sky, about how he could see the stars from his hospital window when he couldn't sleep due to pain. The simple words carried such raw emotion that Julian felt tears pricking at his eyes. When the session ended, the children reluctantly dispersed for lunch and treatments, each clutching their copy of Zarya's book. Several paused to hug her before leaving. Zarya noticed Julian then, giving him a small wave. She spoke briefly with a nurse before making her way to where he stood. "You came," she said, as if still somewhat surprised by this fact. "I said I would," Julian replied. "This was incredible, Zarya. What you do here, how you connect with these kids. It's beautiful." Zarya smiled, a hint of shyness in her expression. "They're the amazing ones. So much courage in such small bodies." "They adore you," Julian observed. "I can see why." Zarya glanced at her watch. "I have about an hour before my next session. Are you hungry? The cafeteria food is surprisingly good." Julian nodded, pleased by the invitation. "Lead the way." Over lunch in the hospital cafeteria, they talked easily, almost like old times. Julian asked about the children, and Zarya shared stories of their progress, their setbacks, their remarkable resilience. She spoke with such passion about her work that Julian couldn't help but be moved. "You've found your calling," he said. "It's obvious how much you love this." "I do," Zarya agreed. "What about you? How's the new fund going?" Julian told her about the startups they were considering, the mentorship program he'd established, the changes he'd made to his investment criteria. "We're focusing on founders who are solving real problems, not just chasing quick returns, people with vision and integrity." "That sounds like the real you," Zarya said thoughtfully. "The man I fell in love with, not the one who was trying to impress people who didn't matter." Julian's heart swelled at her words. "I'm trying to be that man every day now." "I can see that," Zarya admitted. Their conversation continued, touching on Julian's viral blog post, Zarya's upcoming poetry workshops, and the changes in both their lives since their breakup. The hour passed quickly, and soon it was time for Zarya to return to work. "I have art therapy with the younger kids at 2, she explained, gathering her things. Julian nodded. "Thank you for letting me come today, for letting me see this part of your world." "Thank you for showing up," Zarya replied simply. As they stood to leave, Julian gathered his courage. "Zarya, would you have dinner with me this weekend, a real date out in public, wherever you want to go?" Zarya hesitated, then smiled. "Yes, I'd like that." Julian couldn't hide his joy. "Saturday? I can pick you up at 7? "Saturday works," Zarya confirmed. "But let's meet there. Baby steps, remember?" Julian nodded, understanding her caution. Baby steps. They walked together to the elevator, where Zarya would go up to the pediatric floor and Julian would head down to the exit. Before the doors opened, Zarya turned to him. "Julian, I want to be clear about something. I'm giving us a chance because I see you making real changes, but I need to know this isn't temporary, that you won't slip back into old patterns the first time it gets difficult." "I understand," Julian said seriously. "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, but I can promise that I'll never hide you or us again. I'm done with that life, Zarya. Completely done." Zarya nodded, satisfied for now. "I'll text you the restaurant address for Saturday." As Julian left the hospital, he felt lighter than he had in months. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. It wasn't a guarantee of a future together, but it was hope, and for now, that was enough. By Saturday evening, Julian was a bundle of nerves. He'd changed his outfit 3 times, wanting to look good but not like he was trying too hard. Finally, he settled on dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, a far cry from the designer suits he'd once considered essential. The restaurant Zarya had chosen was a small Ethiopian place in a diverse neighborhood, far from the exclusive venues Julian had once frequented. It was warm and inviting, with colorful decor and delicious aromas filling the air. Zarya was already seated when he arrived, looking beautiful in a deep blue dress, her curls loose around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw him, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "You found it," she said, as he sat across from her. "Your directions were perfect," Julian replied. "This place looks amazing." "It's one of my favorites," Zarya explained. "The owners, Makeda and Dawit, came to Miami as refugees 15 years ago. They saved for a decade to open this restaurant." Julian looked around with fresh appreciation. "It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with me." Their conversation flowed easily over dinner, both of them carefully avoiding the painful topics of their past. Instead, they focused on the present. Zarya's growing recognition as a poet, Julian's new approach to business, books they'd read, ideas they were exploring. By the time they finished their meal, sharing a traditional coffee ceremony offered by the owners who clearly knew and adored Zarya, Julian felt more hopeful than he had in months. There was still a connection between them, still something real and valuable. As they left the restaurant, the warm Miami night enveloping them, Julian turned to Zarya. "Would you like to walk for a bit? There's a park nearby, I think." Zarya nodded. "I'd like that." They strolled side by side, not touching but close enough to feel each other's presence. The park was quiet, just a few other couples and families enjoying the evening. "Thank you for tonight," Julian said after a comfortable silence, "for giving me this chance." Zarya looked up at him, her expression serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," Julian replied. "What changed? Really changed, I mean. Because the last time we were together, you chose them over me. You chose that world over ours." Julian considered her question carefully. "I lost you," he said simply, "and it broke me open, made me see what I'd become, what I was sacrificing for success that didn't even make me happy." He paused, searching for the right words. "But it wasn't just losing you, though that was the catalyst. It was realizing that I'd built my life around impressing people I didn't even respect, people whose values were completely opposed to mine. I was so focused on being accepted that I forgot to ask if these were even the people whose acceptance I wanted." Zarya listened intently, her eyes never leaving his face. "When you left," Julian continued, "I had to face the emptiness of that life, the hollowness of those relationships, and I realized I had a choice. I could keep living a lie, or I could start building something real, something that reflected who I actually am and what I truly value." "And who are you, Julian?" Zarya asked softly. "Who are you when no one's watching, when there's nothing to prove?" Julian smiled. "I'm still figuring that out, but I know I'm someone who values honesty over image, someone who wants to use whatever success I achieve to create opportunities for others, not just wealth for myself, someone who wants to be worthy of a woman who sees the real me and loves me anyway." Zarya's expression softened. "That sounds like someone I'd like to know." They continued walking, the night air warm around them. When they reached a small fountain in the center of the park, they stopped, watching the water sparkle under the moonlight. "I missed you," Zarya admitted quietly. "Even when I was angry, even when I knew walking away was the right thing to do, I still missed you." Julian's heart leaped at her words. "I missed you every minute of every day." Slowly, carefully, he reached for her hand. Zarya hesitated for just a moment before lacing her fingers with his. The simple touch felt like coming home. "I can't promise this will work," Zarya warned. "We hurt each other." "No," Julian corrected gently. "I hurt you, and I will spend as long as it takes making that right if you'll let me." Zarya squeezed his hand. "Baby steps, remember?" Julian nodded, content with this small beginning. Baby steps. As they walked back toward the restaurant where their cars were parked, still hand in hand, Julian felt a sense of peace he'd almost forgotten was possible. The path ahead wasn't clear, and forgiveness wasn't guaranteed, but they were walking together in the light. For now that was enough. What neither of them knew was that their story was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would test Julian's commitment more than either of them could have anticipated. 2 months passed, and Julian and Zarya's relationship slowly blossomed again. Baby steps had turned into a careful dance of rediscovery, dinner dates, walks on the beach, poetry readings, and honest conversations about their hopes and fears. Julian had kept his promise, never hiding Zarya or their relationship. He posted photos of them together on social media, introduced her to his new business associates, and proudly stood by her side at literary events. Zarya in turn had opened her heart again, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as Julian consistently showed her through actions, not just words, that he had truly changed. On a warm Sunday afternoon, They sat together on Zarya's small balcony, enjoying the ocean breeze. Julian had just finished reading a draft of Zarya's latest poem, a hopeful piece about second chances and redemption. "It's beautiful," Julian said, handing the notebook back to her. "Your best work yet." Zarya smiled, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "It was inspired by us, by how far we've come." Julian reached for her hand, still amazed that he had this second chance. "I love you, Zarya, more than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," she replied, the words coming easily now after weeks of rebuilding trust. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by Julian's phone ringing. He glanced at it, ready to ignore the call, but the name on the screen made him pause. "It's William Whitmore," he said, surprised. He hadn't heard from Richard's father since being cut out of the tech campus deal months ago. "You should answer it," Zarya encouraged. Julian nodded and picked up the call. "Hello, Mr. Whitmore." "Julian, my boy," William's voice boomed through the speaker. "How are you?" "I'm well, sir," Julian replied cautiously. "What can I do for you?" "I'll get right to the point," William said. "The tech campus project has hit some complications. The investors are nervous about recent market fluctuations, and frankly, your replacement hasn't inspired much confidence." Julian said nothing, waiting for William to continue. "The board and I have been following your new venture," William went on. "Impressive results, especially with those minority-owned startups you've backed. Very forward-thinking." Julian exchanged a glance with Zarya, who was watching him with raised eyebrows. "Thank you," Julian said carefully. "Here's my proposition," William continued. "We want you back on the tech campus project as the lead partner, not just an investor. You bring your fresh perspective, your diverse connections, and we provide the capital and infrastructure." Julian was stunned. This was the opportunity he'd once dreamed of, the deal he'd sacrificed so much to be part of. But now it came with strings attached. "I appreciate the offer," Julian said, "but I need to understand exactly what you're proposing." "My investment philosophy has changed significantly," William chuckled. Yes, all that blog post business about authentic leadership. Very inspiring. Look, we're businessmen, Julian. We adapt. Diversity is the buzzword now, and you've positioned yourself nicely in that space. We can work with that." The condescension in William's tone was unmistakable. He didn't care about authentic leadership or creating opportunities for underrepresented founders. He saw Julian's new direction as a trendy marketing angle, nothing more. "I'll need to think about it," Julian said. "Can you email me the details?" "Of course," William replied. "But don't think too long. This opportunity won't wait forever. Oh, and Julian, there's a gala next Friday announcing the revised plans for the campus. Black tie, press, the works. I expect you'll be there?" Julian hesitated. "If I decide to move forward, yes." "Excellent. Bring that lovely date we discussed last time." "The Instagram model." Julian's jaw tightened. "Actually, sir, I'm seeing someone else now, someone very special to me." "Ah, well, whoever she is, make sure she looks good for the cameras," William said dismissively. "Image matters in this business, as you know." After ending the call, Julian sat in silence, processing what had just happened. Zarya watched him, concern in her eyes. "What did he want?" she asked finally. Julian explained William's offer, his expression troubled. "Here's the deal I always wanted, the one I thought would define my success. And now," Zarya prompted gently. "Now I'm not sure it's worth the compromise," Julian admitted. "William doesn't care about the values I've built my new fund on. He just sees them as a marketing angle." Zarya nodded thoughtfully. "What will you do?" "I don't know yet," Julian said honestly. "I need to see the details, think it through." Zarya squeezed his hand supportively. "Whatever you decide, I'm here." Julian brought her hand to his lips, kissing it softly. "That's all that matters to me now." Over the next few days, Julian carefully reviewed William's proposal. The terms were generous, more capital than Julian's new fund could raise on its own, prominent billing on all marketing materials, a corner office in the campus's main building. But reading between the lines, Julian saw the truth. William expected him to be the diverse face of the project, while the old guard maintained control of the real decisions. Julian discussed the proposal with his team, valuing their perspectives. They were excited about the resources but wary of the strings attached. No one wanted to compromise the authentic values they'd built their fund on. "So what do we do, boss?" asked Aisha, Julian's brilliant chief financial officer, whom he'd hired away from a major bank. "This could accelerate our growth by years." "Or it could destroy everything we've built," countered Marcus, the technical advisor who'd been with Julian from the beginning. Julian sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I need to talk to William face to face." get a better read on how much control we'd actually have. That evening, Julian called William and arranged a meeting for the following day. When he told Zarya about it over dinner, she studied his face carefully. "What are you hoping to hear from him?" she asked. Julian considered the question. "Honestly, I'm hoping he'll convince me that he really values what we're doing, not just the optics of it. But I don't think that's likely." Zarya nodded. "And the gala on Friday? Will you go?" "If we reach an agreement, yes," Julian said. "Would you come with me?" Zarya hesitated. "To a gala hosted by the same people who made those racist jokes about me, who represent everything about that world that nearly destroyed us." Julian reached across the table for her hand. "I understand if you don't want to, but if I do this deal, I want to do it differently this time. I want to walk in there with you proudly by my side, not hiding who we are or what we stand for." Zarya's expression softened. "Let's see what happens with William first." William Whitmore's office occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of Miami, a physical reminder of how high William had climbed in the business world. Julian sat across from William's massive desk, listening as the older man outlined his vision for the tech campus. It was ambitious, a hub for innovation, a magnet for talent, a transformation of Miami's business landscape. "The thing is, Julian," William was saying, "your recent rebranding has attracted attention from a demographic we've been struggling to reach. Young, diverse, socially conscious. It's a valuable market segment." Julian frowned. "It's not a rebrand, Mr. Whitmore, it's who I am." William waved his hand dismissively. "Call it what you like. The point is, we need your image, your connections to these communities. In return, you get the backing of the biggest names in Miami business." "And my investment criteria?" Julian asked. "My focus on underrepresented founders, my ethical standards for the companies we back?" William's smile tightened. "We'd expect you to maintain your current initiatives while also supporting our broader strategy, which is maximum return for our investors, of course," William said plainly. "The social justice angle is fine for press releases, but at the end of the day, this is business, not charity." Julian nodded slowly, everything becoming clear. "So you want me as the diverse, progressive face of the project, while the real decisions are made by the same old boys club?" William's expression hardened. "I'd encourage you to think practically, Julian. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. Don't let idealism cloud your judgment." "What about the gala on Friday?" Julian asked. "What role would I play there?" William brightened, clearly thinking Julian was coming around. "We'd announce you as the new lead partner. You'd give a short speech about innovation and inclusion, your specialty these days. The press would eat it up. And my date," Julian pressed. "Would she be welcome? A black woman with natural hair who works at a children's hospital and writes poetry about authenticity?" William's smile faltered. "Of course, any date you choose would be accommodated, though I might suggest someone with more media appeal. First impressions matter in these circles, as you know." Julian stood up, having heard enough. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Whitmore, and for clarifying exactly what this offer entails." William looked startled. "You're not seriously walking away from this opportunity?" "Actually, I am," Julian said firmly. "I've worked too hard to build something real to compromise it now. My fund will succeed or fail based on our actual values, not on how well we perform them for the cameras. This is about that woman, isn't it?" William scoffed. "Richard told me you'd gone soft over some charity case." Julian felt a flash of anger, but kept his composure. "Her name is Zarya Bennett. She's a published poet, a gifted therapist, and the most authentic person I've ever known. And no, this isn't about her. It's about me finally being honest about who I am and what I stand for." Julian walked to the door, then turned back. "You know what the sad part is, Mr. Whitmore? With genuine diversity of thought and background, your tech campus could be revolutionary. Instead, it'll be just another glass tower full of the same old ideas." William's face reddened. "You'll regret this, Julian. No one walks away from me." "Actually," Julian said with a small smile, "I think walking away from you might be the best business decision I've ever made." Julian felt lighter as he left William's office, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He immediately called Zarya. "It's done," he said when she answered. "I turned him down." "Are you okay?" Zarya asked, concern in her voice. "Better than okay," Julian assured her. "For the first time, I feel completely certain about my path forward." "I'm proud of you," Zarya said softly. "That couldn't have been easy." "Actually, it was," Julian replied, surprising himself with the truth of it. "Once I heard what he really wanted, there was no decision to make. Later that evening, Julian and Zarya met for dinner at their favorite cafe, the same one where they'd first met during a thunderstorm months ago. As they shared a meal and talked about their days, Julian couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come, and how differently things might have turned out if he hadn't learned what truly mattered. "So what happens now?" Zarya asked. "With your fund?" "We keep building," Julian said simply. "The right way, with the right people, for the right reasons. It might take longer without William's connections, but it'll be real." Zarya nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "There's something I haven't told you," she said. "I wasn't sure if it was the right time, but now—" Julian's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "Remember that poetry reading I did last month at the university?" Zarya began. "There was someone in the audience, Elaine Rosario." Julian recognized the name immediately. "The tech philanthropist? Founder of the Rosario Foundation?" Zarya nodded. "She came backstage afterward. We talked about my work at the children's hospital, about art therapy, about my poetry. She was incredible, so down to earth, despite her success." "That's amazing," Julian said, genuinely happy for Zarya. "Was she interested in supporting your programs?" "Yes, but that's not all," Zarya continued. "When I mentioned you, us, she recognized your name. She's been following your new fund, apparently." Julian was surprised. Elaine Rosario was a legend in the tech world, one of the few women to build a billion-dollar company from scratch, and now a major philanthropist focused on expanding opportunities in technology for underserved communities. "She wants to meet with you," Zarya revealed, "to discuss a potential partnership between her foundation and your fund." Julian was stunned. "Elaine Rosario wants to meet with me. How did you not tell me this immediately?" Zarya smiled sheepishly. "I wanted to, but then William called with his offer, and I didn't want to influence your decision. This had to be your choice, Julian, not a calculation." Julian shook his head in amazement. "You're incredible, you know that." "So I've been told," Zarya teased. "The meeting is next week, if you're interested." "If I'm interested? In meeting one of the most visionary investors in tech who actually shares our values? Yes, I think I might be able to fit that into my schedule." Julian laughed. As they walked home that evening, hand in hand under the Miami stars, Julian felt a profound sense of gratitude. He'd nearly lost everything that mattered by chasing the wrong definition of success. Now, having chosen authenticity over image, truth over acceptance, he found himself with more than he'd ever dreamed possible, both personally and professionally. "You know," Julian said thoughtfully, "a year ago, if someone had told me I'd walk away from William Whitmore's offer, I would have thought they were crazy." "And now?" Zarya prompted. "Now I can't imagine making any other choice," Julian replied. "Some opportunities aren't worth the compromise." Zarya squeezed his hand. "That's how I knew you'd really changed. The old Julian would have found a way to justify taking the deal." Julian nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. The old Julian was afraid of not belonging, of not being enough. "I don't feel that fear anymore." They stopped walking, facing each other under a street lamp. Julian gazed at Zarya, taking in her beautiful face, her soulful eyes, the strength and grace that had drawn him to her from the beginning. "I love you," he said simply. Not in secret, not with conditions, just completely, in the light. Zarya's smile was radiant. "I love you too, the real you." 3 weeks later, Julian stood nervously adjusting his tie in the mirror of his hotel room. Tonight was the gala for the Rosario Foundation's annual Innovation Awards, and he was attending not just as a guest, but as a newly announced partner in Rosario's Inclusive Innovation Initiative. His meeting with Elaine Rosario had exceeded all expectations. She wasn't just interested in his fund, she was impressed by his public stance against toxic business culture. "We need more leaders willing to walk away from the wrong opportunities," she had told him. "That's how real change happens." The partnership they formed would provide Julian's fund with more capital than William Whitmore had offered, but with complete alignment of values and vision. Together they would invest in diverse founders, building companies that solved real problems, not just chasing quick returns. A knock at the door interrupted Julian's thoughts. He opened it to find Zarya standing in the hallway, breathtaking in a deep emerald silk gown that flowed around her like water. Her natural curls were styled in an elegant updo, her brown skin glowing, her eyes bright with excitement. "You look—" Julian struggled to find words adequate to her beauty. "Incredible doesn't even begin to cover it." Zarya smiled, a hint of shyness in her expression. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Julian offered her his arm. Ready to make an entrance? Zarya nodded, taking his arm. Always. The ballroom of Miami's most exclusive hotel was transformed for the gala. Elegant decor, soft lighting, the city's elite gathered in their finest attire. As Julian and Zarya entered, heads turned. Not because they didn't belong, but because they commanded attention. Confident, beautiful, radiating authenticity in a room often filled with carefully constructed images. Julian! Zarya! Elaine Rosario approached, elegant in a simple black gown. I'm so glad you both could make it. We wouldn't miss it, Julian replied warmly. Thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you for being exactly who we need right now, Elaine said sincerely. Now come meet some people who are excited about our partnership. As they moved through the crowd, Julian was surprised to spot familiar faces. Richard, Blake, and the others from his old circle clustered near the bar. They had clearly not expected to see him here in this context, with Zarya proudly by his side. Richard broke away from the group, approaching with a carefully neutral expression. Julian, didn't expect to see you tonight. Richard, Julian nodded. Allow me to introduce Zarya Bennett, my partner. Zarya, this is Richard Whitmore. Richard extended his hand to Zarya, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Pleasure to meet you. I've heard a lot about you. Likewise, Zarya replied coolly, shaking his hand briefly. I understand congratulations are in order, Richard continued, addressing Julian. Quite a coup, partnering with the Rosario Foundation. Thank you, Julian said simply. It's an alignment of values and vision. Richard nodded, clearly uncomfortable. Well, I should get back to my group. Good seeing you, Julian. Nice to meet you, Zarya. As Richard retreated, Julian felt Zarya squeeze his hand. You okay? She asked quietly. Julian smiled, realizing he felt nothing but pity for his former friend, still trapped in that shallow world. Never better. The evening continued with speeches, awards, and networking. Julian found himself repeatedly approached by investors and entrepreneurs interested in his fund's work. Each time he proudly introduced Zarya, making sure everyone understood she was not just his date, but an essential part of his life. Near the end of the gala, Elaine Rosario took the stage to announce the new Inclusive Innovation Initiative. She called Julian up to join her, inviting him to say a few words about their partnership. Standing at the podium, looking out at the crowd, Julian felt a moment of déjà vu. This was the kind of event he'd once dreamed of, being recognized, applauded, accepted by the elite. But now, his gaze found Zarya, watching him with love and pride, and he understood that true success had nothing to do with approval from others. Thank you, Elaine, Julian began, and thank you all for being here tonight. A few months ago, I thought success meant being accepted in certain circles, impressing certain people. I was willing to compromise who I was, who I loved, to achieve that narrow definition of success. The ballroom was silent, every eye on Julian as he continued. What I've learned since then is that real success isn't about who approves of you. It's about being true to your values, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. It's about having the courage to live in the light, to love in the light, to do business in the light. Julian's eyes found Zarya again, drawing strength from her presence. The Inclusive Innovation Initiative isn't just about funding diverse founders, though that's a crucial part of our mission. It's about changing the culture of business itself, moving from exclusivity to inclusivity, from image to substance, from wealth creation for the few to opportunity creation for the many. As Julian concluded his remarks to enthusiastic applause, he noticed something unexpected. Richard and several others from his old circle were clapping too, their expressions thoughtful rather than dismissive. Later, as the gala wound down, Julian and Zarya found a quiet moment on the hotel's terrace, overlooking the Miami skyline. You were amazing in there, Zarya said, wrapping her arms around his waist. It was your words, Julian replied. Love in the light. That's what changed everything for me. Zarya smiled up at him. We've come a long way from hiding in that little cafe, haven't we? Julian nodded, pulling her closer. And we're just getting started. As they stood together under the stars, Julian marveled at the journey that had brought them here. He'd lost everything he thought he wanted, only to gain what he truly needed. A love based on truth, a career based on values, and the courage to live authentically. In the end, the walk-in moment that had seemed so devastating, Zarya walking away from him, had become the catalyst for his redemption. And now she had walked into his life again, this time with both of them standing proudly in the light. 6 months later, Julian and Zarya stood hand in hand on the roof of a newly renovated building in a once-neglected neighborhood of Miami. Around them, a diverse crowd had gathered for the grand opening of the Bennett Hart Center for Arts and Innovation, a community space that combined Zarya's passion for art therapy with Julian's focus on entrepreneurship. The center would offer free classes for children, workspace for local startups, and arts programs for the community. It represented everything Julian and Zarya believed in: opportunity, authenticity, and the power of bringing different worlds together. "Ready?" Julian asked, squeezing Zarya's hand. She nodded, eyes bright with happy tears. Together they cut the ribbon, officially opening the center as the crowd cheered. Later, as they mingled with guests, Julian was surprised to see Richard Whitmore enter, looking somewhat out of place but determined. "Julian," Richard said, approaching cautiously. "Got a minute?" Julian nodded, excusing himself from his conversation. "What brings you here, Richard?" Richard shifted uncomfortably. "I've been thinking about what you said at the Rosario Gala, about authenticity and values." He paused, clearly struggling with his words. "I may have been wrong about some things." Julian raised his eyebrows, genuinely surprised. "Go on." "The tech campus is floundering," Richard admitted. "Dad's old approach isn't working anymore. Investors want more than just returns now. They want impact, diversity, sustainability, all the things you've been talking about." Julian nodded, understanding where this was going. And I thought maybe we could talk about a different kind of partnership, one based on real values, not just image." Richard looked sincere for perhaps the first time in their long acquaintance. Julian considered his former friend thoughtfully. "It won't be easy, Richard. Real change never is." "I know," Richard acknowledged, "but I'm willing to try, if you are." Julian extended his hand. "Come by the office next week. We'll talk." As Richard walked away, Zarya appeared at Julian's side. "Was that Richard Whitmore actually showing humility?" she asked, amazed. Julian chuckled. "Miracles do happen, apparently." "Speaking of miracles," Zarya said, a mysterious smile playing on her lips, "there's something I need to tell you." Julian turned to her, noting the special glow in her eyes. "What is it?" Zarya took his hands in hers, placing them gently on her stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Julian froze, his eyes widening. "A baby? You're pregnant?" Zarya confirmed, her smile radiant. "About 8 weeks along." Joy unlike anything Julian had ever known surged through him. He wrapped his arms around Zarya, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that said more than words ever could. When he set her down, tears of happiness shining in his eyes, Julian knew with absolute certainty that this love, this family they were creating, this life built on truth, was the real definition of success. "I love you," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "Both of you, and we love you," Zarya replied softly. "In the light, always in the light." As the sunset painted the Miami sky in brilliant hues of gold and purple, Julian and Zarya stood together, surrounded by the community they had helped build, looking toward a future brighter than either could have imagined when she first walked into that cafe during a thunderstorm, offering a napkin to a stranger who needed so much more than he knew. Their story wasn't perfect. It was messy, complicated, and at times painful, but it was real. And in a world that so often valued image over substance, that reality, that authenticity, was the most beautiful thing of all. The end.